Many years ago, I was working in a very different world. I was working in the world of advertising and marketing, actually running an advertising agency in England. And I won a holiday, which was very synchronistic, because a holiday that I won was a holiday to Brazil, and it was to go to Carnivale in Rio. I had seen a tiny little cutting in a magazine about a floating lodge in the Amazon. And I remembered this, and I thought, I really want to go to that floating lodge. So I spoke to the travel agent. No, they couldn't find it. They couldn't find it. And, you know, you're going to Carnivale. What do you want? Cut a long story short, I went into a travel agent, and that was in the days before internet, so there were thousands of brochures, and I scoured every brochure until I found this little bit, floating lodge in the Amazon. And the travel agent then booked it for myself and my sister. And we went by ferry across the Amazon and the Rio Negro first, and then by bus, if you could call it bus, a little bit of beat-up vehicle, motor-driven canoe, and then paddle canoe. And we ended up in this exquisite place in the middle of nowhere in this floating lodge. And I was in heaven. Every day the rain would pour down and you would hear the monkeys calling, the rain would pour down, I would sit in a hammock and cry. It was like Mother Nature was giving me this opportunity to release anything that needed to let go. And then we'd go out for adventures in the canoes. The guide on this lodge was a Brazilian man who'd grown up in the jungle. And he had never left the jungle until he was 19 years old. Anyway, one day we were sitting over dinner, and Francisco looked at me and he said, you're a healer. You know you have healing ability. And I didn't really understand what he was talking about. But when he said that, my right arm, started radiating, pumping heat. My sister, who was over there, said, you're burning my arm, because my arm was just radiating heat. And I'm not sure what it was that he'd seen in me, but he recognized and reminded me that I actually have this healing gift. I then went a few days later, when we had to fly back to Rio, and we cried all the way. I realized later that Francisco was a guide in the true sense of the word. I had his postal address and I had his phone number. And later, when I was back in England, I tried to contact him and was never able to contact him again. No one had heard of him. On the number that I called, the letters were returned. So I actually met him just for that message, for him to give me that message. And I'm very grateful for that. I actually gave my first ever healing. There was a man staying in the hotel and he was supposed to catch a flight. And he said, I can't catch the flight tomorrow because I've got an ear problem. And not knowing anything about healing really, I said, oh well, let me give it a try. So I did my first ever healing and didn't think too much about it. Felt a bit of energy flowing in my arm as I put my hand on his ear, and then said goodbye, went to bed. The next morning I was woken by the phone and he was ringing and he said, thank you so much, I'm off to the airport. I don't know what you did, but my ear's perfect and I'm off to get my flight. And as I came to that morning, I suddenly realized, oh, I've got an earache. So that was a really big lesson for me, to learn how to work with healing energy without taking on the other person's issues. And so, of course, many years later, I now work very clearly with my own boundaries, with the client's boundaries, and make sure that we have a clear separation by the time the healing session is over. But it was that moment in the Amazon when Francisco actually said to me, you've got healing abilities, that when I look back now, that was the beginning of this journey away from the hustle and bustle of advertising and all the stress related to that, into this other world of working with people and following my heart. We never know what signposts we're going to receive along our path. And sometimes it's not till later that we can look back and say, yes, that was a pivotal moment on my soul journey And that's what that moment in the Amazon was for me.